Good morning, guys. All right, so because we cannot be there in person, I figured to go through a few more of these hormones from different glands of the endocrine system. I'm going to go through the rest of this PowerPoint. I know that I already gave it to you and you have it. I just figured it's still good for me to go through it and just hear it instead of maybe silently sitting there and just reading. So I'm going to have you guys watch this and then maybe answer a question or two on Google Classroom. All right, so pretty simple for what we got going on here. Okay, so we already talked about like the pineal gland. We talked about the hypothalamus. We talked about the pituitary gland. So I just want to show you the rest of them, the rest of the glands, and the hormones they make. All right. So the next thing would be the thyroid. So the thyroid and parathyroid kind of go together. They're pretty much found in the same location, which I'll show you in the next slide. So the thyroid makes three different types of hormones. We have calcitonin, right? Calcitonin sounds like what it actually helps to create or stimulate, which is the transfer of calcium from blood to bones, right? So calcitonin, calcium, going from inside the blood to bones, the bone tissue to make your bones strong. That makes sense, right? Thyroxine is really awesome. It helps to maintain blood pressure, heart rate, body temperature, and just the increased amount of oxygen consumption inside cells. So thyroxine, which goes along with thyroid, right? Thyroxine, thyroid. So your thyroid creates this to help with these very simple, negative feedback mechanisms, controlling things or helping to control like temperature, heart rate, blood pressure. And so does the last one for the thyroid. So the thyroid also creates triiodothyronine. Ugh, mouthful. But they both pretty much do the same thing. You can see in both these boxes, they just simply have the same thing stated. Right. So what's cool about your thyroid is it helps to, again, maintain all of these things, a lot of negative feedback mechanisms, and calcitonin is an important one. It helps to actually create those calcium ions to help with your bones, make your bones strong, right? So the thyroid's a little bit bigger than the parathyroid. So here are the parathyroid glands, right? They're small. There's 4 of them, and they're found on the thyroid. Okay, so the big pink guy is your thyroid, and then the tiny little orange dots are the parathyroid glands. So kind of with your thyroid, the parathyroid glands help to create or raising levels of calcium, right? So it's going to help to raise the level of calcium in the bloodstream. It's called the parathyroid hormone. Pretty easy since it's the only one that it makes, right? So we have parathyroid gland makes the parathyroid hormone, or you can say the PTH, easy. And it helps with raising levels of calcium. So you can see that the thyroid and parathyroid both work together to help with calcium levels, right? So your thyroid and parathyroid talk to each other about initiating the transfer of calcium from the blood to the bones, right? So super important. This is found up near the trachea, right? So a little bit underneath where your chin is. This is where both of these are found. Okay. Thymus, right? Thymus gland. It creates thymosin, and this is what's so tricky to find when you do dissection. I really hope we get back to school so maybe we can see it on the cats. No promises, sadly. But the thymus sits right on top of the heart. So you're about like, this is what your heart is going to look like, right? So your thymus gland sits right here, kind of like where the the superior vena cava sits along with the aorta. So you can see it kind of sits along with those major blood vessels. And it's not too large, very small, which is why it's very easy to destroy when dissecting. Over here, it's showing you, again, the thymus gland, but it's much bigger. So it actually shrinks as you get older, right? The tissue becomes a bit smaller. So when you're newborn, you can see over to the side. I don't want to touch my mouse, it keeps blocking it. Over to the side, newborn, it's very, very large, right? It's taking up like half of the whole entire heart. 2 years old, it's getting a tiny bit smaller, and then as an adult, it's kind of reduced its size, maybe by like a quarter or two. All right, what happens in the thymus is it helps to develop T cells for the immune system. All right, so we're going to talk about the difference between T cells and like B cells for the immune system. If you took AP Bio last year, you might have talked about them. You might have, not 100% sure. I think Ms. Sterling did talk about them, but the thymus creates T cells. So you can think of thymus T cells. So it helps them to develop. T cells are major immune cells. So it makes sense that as a newborn, your thymus gland is much larger, while when you're an adult, it becomes a bit smaller, right? When you're smaller, when you're younger, your immune system is still developing, so it's going to be large. And as you're getting older, it gets a little bit smaller because, your body has built up more resistance. So it makes sense that it kind of shrinks in size a little bit, right? So thymosin, developing T cells. All right, these little lovely things. So here's our kidney over at the side, right? This bean, our kidney bean, we've talked about it before last year. Here's the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland sits right on top of the kidney. So you have two, right, on either side, and they sit right on top. And they play a lot in, again, like stress and that fight or flight response, right? So we've seen some of these things like epinephrine, norepinephrine. Then we get something called cortisol and aldosterone. All right, so norepinephrine helps with the fight or flight reaction. It helps to release glucose into the bloodstream, right? So it's releasing glucose to give you a boost of energy. That makes sense. So norepinephrine and epinephrine work kind of together. It's still that fight or flight response, releasing glucose into the bloodstream. So both of those things are kind of giving a quick boost of energy. All right. Aldosterone is going to help to maintain salt and water balance, right? Which makes sense because it's sitting with your kidney. So your kidneys are in charge of helping to maintain liquids in the body, right? Getting rid of salts, reabsorbing salts, taking away extra water, keeping water if needed. So it helps to maintain that water and salt balance. And then cortisol. All right, cortisol helps to maintain things like lipids, carbs, and proteins. Again, super important that you're absorbing, right, our macromolecules. But what gets a little crazy with this guy down here is when you are super stressed out, it'll actually, your adrenal glands will release a lot of the cortisol, which causes a lot of problems, which you exhibit during stress, right? You could get things like headaches, irregular breathing, some people's stress manifests into things like panic attacks, right? So this hormone actually is helping to regulate a lot of function within the body, especially with breaking down our important macromolecules for energy and nutritional purposes. So when it becomes out of whack, it starts to release too much. All right, so too much is not a good thing. So this guy down here is responsible for why a lot of things in the body kind of go out of whack when there's too much stress, which hopefully I can get a little bit more into a tiny bit later. All right, so your adrenal glands are great for when you're in a situation you need to get out of there, quick, bursts of energy of that oxygen, but it also can end up hurting you if too much stress, too much of that like hyped up situation happens, right? So adrenal glands. So here's our adrenal glands, what they do. All right, pancreas. So the pancreas creates two things, glucagon and insulin, right, which literally just control the release of your glucose or your blood sugar, right? Insulin's in charge of lowering it, glucagon's in charge of increasing it. So that's another negative feedback mechanism, constantly going between raising your blood level, lowering blood level, right? Raising and lowering. Lastly, there's some extras, gastrin, which is in the stomach lining, helping to break things down, like our macromolecules, and secretin, which also helps to break down things. It's found in like bile. All right, so the other two. All right, I can only make 10-minute videos, and I'm about 20 seconds before I have to stop. So just go through this. You have the plain version. You have this, me explaining a little bit. I'm going to have you answer a question on Google Classroom. I miss you guys. Hopefully things, start clearing up and we hear some good news. But if not, I'll be around. All right. Have a wonderful day.